Hello, this is Pixie doing another video. There's a good few things to talk about today. I think I'll talk about what's interesting is Trump's new branch of the military being a space force. You might have different ranks like space commander and space sergeant or something. So there'll be different degrees within the military now, and how one might shift over to the other. So I guess really it's because I think based on my understanding that the military was basically the Navy was involved in space, and NASA was a branch of the Navy. That's, it's always been connected to that. That's why you had spaceships and things like that. Crafts and ships. You can have aircraft. So there's always been a mixture between the two. You still might have something in the future, like a giant. It would look like a bit like a battleship in space. But then you'd have smaller ships that come out, the scout ships, but however look like something from the Air Force, so it's an interesting sort of fusion. And also space stations, their best interest would be to land on an asteroid and then based on the elements, bore it out and actually build something internally inside the asteroid as a space station, and then take it on a slightly different orbit. You just need to put a lot of propellant thrusters of some sorts on there. There may be some different ones that can be used. It depends if they've created is what they call a zero drive, I think. Basically you can create its own bit of a gear lock there. Yeah, it basically creates its own propulsion using an energy field. And it probably works down the principle of magnets and electricity, because there's a thing where if a magnet, I think it goes towards copper or a conductive metal, it generates a field that repulses it. It's just a way to generate that as a collective force to push something. You may be able to do that using the sun, because the sunlight has an electric element to it. And I was seeing something which leads me on to slightly a different topic. I was looking at some Planet X news. They were talking about simulated moons and simulated suns and stuff. But I've had this feeling that they don't really, what hasn't been looked at is the physics behind light. And that the physics of light is basically it's very poor. I mean, science is probably only 5% understanding of the universe. So when somebody starts saying, "Oh yeah, this is the science," and they do everything based on physical particles, and that's really the structure, because they needed something structured to work with. Energy is too unpredictable. However, everything is energy. So once you've established that, you need to reevaluate everything, because why is a particle at one point in time it can flip over and become a waveform? That's because light exists in more than one dimension. Anything that lives in the spectrum exists elsewhere at the same time, and that's really the basic understanding for it. And then where the dimensions cross over, the density of it can change. It's like a hologram basically, yeah. If you've got 2 points of light that meet at one point, they can generate the hologram, but separately they can exist as just a gram, basically, of information. chunk of data and one chunk of data combined. And it's the same for the physics of the universe. What we're looking at, three-dimensional holograms and four-dimensional holograms. I think possibly atoms are four-dimensional, because they've got an internal dimension that we don't understand. We only appreciate the external dimension, which is basically the projected force on the outside. And then they've got a sort of kind of intelligence system in as well. You've got the oversoul, or it's also used as the unisoul, and this is a kind of religious concept. A lot of people seem to think that God's this completely separate entity. My understanding is that it's actually all interwoven and linked, in the same way as that I could create a dream and still exist outside the dream, but I am the dream. So it's or am I, or is this just another plane of dimension of my own existence? It's always interesting to think how we exist in this reality, and if it's just like one of many. It's likely one of many, and it's a crossover. That's why people have stuff like guide levels and stuff. They connect to areas of knowledge that might exist out of time and space, because I think space-time is based on the laws of the planet that you're on. So things may move slower or faster depending on that, and there's other realities to that as well, and the consciousness. Like a fly's life, everything's moving slow. Imagine if consciousness runs at the same rate, then the fly's moving around at a really hyper speed, but it's actually not in its own world. Its own world, it perceives it how we would in our world. I mean, we seem quite big, quite quick towards other entities. You know, they see us as really sort of huge. I was kind of reminded of this when I went to a family meal, and I had my niece, and she was sort of only knee high, and then she was trying to look for her dad. So she ran around to all the actual men that were standing up, and then she go, "Oh yeah, Daddy," and that was sort of interesting, because we seemed like giants to her. She couldn't just see our faces and go, "Oh yeah, that's them," because she was so small. So it's quite sweet. So there's concern, I think, with the physics of light. It's like I said, it's got an electrical principle behind it as well. It has a certain consciousness about it. But what happens is it carries the data of what it hits. Everything around me is dark, and I mean, with light, I mean, if I could see all the light that was around me, it would just be, I'd be in a whiteout. I wouldn't be able to see anything, because there's daylight spread out for the whole day. It's just it's when things get hit by it, they illuminate, and there's a slight illumination from the air molecules and dust around me that's possibly basically it's masked by the other things around me, because there's just so much other data in the around. So it's kind of like a filtered out as a bit of as white light or something. But this is the principle with the sun, is it generates a lot of light, and it's light that's reflected back off the sun, so it goes towards back into the sun, that projects this data gets carried by the light that comes out of it. So when people think that there's a coronal hole and you should see a big dark hole, only if there's no light carrying any data would that be true. It's a bit like a shadow. You can see a shadow, and it's got less light in there, and it has the information of the object, the silhouette, but you can still see inside it. So for the sun, there's so much energy there that if a shadow in some way got generated, it would probably get kind of deleted by the amount of energy that's coming out of the sun. However, it does indicate the coronal hole is a magnetic black sun phenomenon, and why the electric part is the white sun phenomenon of it projecting rays. And with electricity, it will go to attracted to negative energy, negative points, and then from there it reflects outwards, absorbs the data. So I think clouds are positively charged. There's things about light travelling through charge, beams of light, and them having a central point. They're kind of the cause and effect. So the light's already there, but it's travelled through like water through a point in the cloud, and it's made a direct line to the Earth, no different than if lightning or anything like that. And that shouldn't be such a surprise, really. I mean, there's things like rainbows. Look how complicated a rainbow is to explain. People say, oh yeah, it's just a polarised light. But, you know, you still got to explain, what does that mean? I mean, why is it earthed? Why is it earthed at 2 points? It goes up in the middle, but it goes down at each side of it. Surely it should just go up, straight up into the sky as a beam. You know, if you fired a light beam through a crystal prism, you'd get something different to what you get with water and the how the droplets are formed. So there's basically, the physics is more complicated than has been explained so far. So that's that side of things, and it'd be interesting to see the space developments with Trump. It also suggests there's possibly the new world order won't be on Earth, so that's maybe something good. Well, they already are, but basically the three major superpowers are possibly the lead forums for the other countries to operate under. So they're the umbrellas. So you've got your Asian Dragon Society, you've got the Slavic Union or something, or the Russian Union, or whatever they want to call themselves. And then you've got the United, I guess the national states or something, because they are, so it's the UNS, because the US is United States, but there's United Nations, and then they seem to be connected, so there's possibly would be under a different name, you know, in a space government. And then within your sort of global space government, there would be a overarching control for the benefit of the Earth, so they make decisions. I mean, when they can set up other colonies, then what they can do is they could say, we've got a bit too many people on Earth, we've got this new colony, who would like to go and live on Mars or something? But the deal is you have to have some skills, or you have to be, you know, trained in a certain area, and then you basically function as a job, and you get credits sent to an account, and you have relay stations whereby you could set up interstellar communications on different moons and stuff. So there's lots of potential stuff. So you wouldn't have to wipe out the population. You just need to deploy them somewhere else. That's really what it is. There might be a point where you say, look, we've got limited resources, so you can't really just go off and have loads of kids. We have to plan how many children, you know, we can have, really. And that comes under all sorts of things, but that's possibly the other way of doing it. And so they've got this talk about the space station, and they seem to be Chinese, Russians and Americans seem to get along quite well with that. It seems like Earth politics, there seems to be a fight over territory and resources. They're not really fighting over people problems, it's business problems, they're fighting industry. That's all it is. I think all they've got to do is come to agreement, they're going to work together on certain things. The other issue is that if you start paying to another military branch, will adjust the budget to do that, and they can legitimise the increasing of the budget financially. But the only problem with the commitment, it may also mean this addiction to the petrol dollar, and we just want to move away from all this fighting over fuel and stuff. It's just so boring, and they make money up anyway, don't they? So what's the point? You'd just have a universal credit system that everyone operates under, that can be transferred into the currency, and I guess the universal credits would be the global currency, that's what I call it. So chemicals. I'll bomb it out in front of this one. And that's it really, that's probably the best way of doing it. So your bit currency or whatever could get fused and become some universal currency, and they'll be taxed on space exploration, things like that, and agree certain deals like mining certain asteroids, miners' rights, country rights, and splitting profits and resources. Because there are asteroids out there just full of gold and stuff. They're out there in space. It's just that knowing they're out there, they're like worried that it could damage the economy as well. If you had like a rich, rare element, and suddenly you started mining loads of it, but then it would just free up money. We would no problem having loads of money, is there? What's the problem? It's trying to bleed everyone dry. It's great if you're poor, but if you're not poor and you're stinking rich, why do you want to do that? You've got it all anyway, so it doesn't make any sense. It's a problem. It's like playing Monopoly and no one said that you've won. So the big oil barons, they've all decided to be best friends and things like that, and all the secret societies have all interlinked and said we could have common objectives to achieve as a group, and basically it's the survival of their groups and working to their common goals. Some other stuff quickly. So I've got some datura seeds. So that's from one pod. There's probably a good 100 or so in there. Some of them, because it started splitting open, it was green. That's why I thought, well, do you know what? I just put it on the side, cut it off, and put it on the side to mature, and it started opening even more. So I thought, well, I'll just get the seeds out. I left some overnight, and then I've taken them out. But I think the ultraviolet makes them darken anyway, so I'll just let them mature a bit. If not, I separate the light ones, and I'll probably create one of my powders or potions. So I end up eating a few of them, have them ground up. They're not as dangerous as people say they are. You have to eat a lot of it. I think it's just been very mature. So first, try a little bit. I'd say the leaves, however, the leaves are a lot more stronger. The root system's a lot more stronger. So you've just got to be careful of the different alkaloids in there, because you can touch it with your hand. The moonflowers are not particularly as strong as people make out. I just let it, basically I let it fertilise, and then when the flower starts to die, I just take the flower, and that could be added to a potion as well. Other interesting stuff. So this is a combination. I think this is a bit more complicated than my other stuff. However, if you make an Epsom salts ormus, perfect for things like your hemp type variety plants, but basically I can mention the word cannabis. It's just there's a lot of taboo, so obviously whatever your laws are and legal restraints, follow that. But yeah, basically when it comes to plant food, Epsom salts are brilliant. If you turn it into an ormus, just add that. I've added to my plants and they've benefited from it. They like sulphur, and they like also magnesium. So yeah, and the other thing I've done recently is I put a film on the window of my bedroom, and I could probably grow mushrooms now on the windowsill, which would be quite interesting because it does not the direct light. Anyway, this is Pixie signing off, and speak to you soon.